wasn't yours. I'm going back, I'm going back, I'm going back, I'm going back, I'm going back to who I was before. I like me better, I like me better.
Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. We are pretty much at the end of the road here with the Karen retrial. It actually has been handed over to the jury, so they are done with the, what is it, evidentiary phase, where, you know, like the state's trying to plead their case, then the defense pleads their case, and they have handed it over to the jury. So they are actually on verdict watch. By the time I even finish filming this video, they might come in with the verdict. If they do, then I will definitely add it in this video, but I feel hopefully by the time you guys are seeing this video, the verdict has come in, and then we'll do like one last wrap it up video on the verdicts and whatever happens after that. But let me catch you guys up on what has happened since the last video that I posted to handing it off to the jury. Let's go. Y'all, I am struggling right now. I done packed up the makeup. I don't know if you can see that, but the tray is pretty much gone. So I am pretty much just working off of makeup that I put aside just in case I need to film any videos before. Oop, make sure the camera doesn't go dark. Before I actually move in. Also, why I just got a lot going on right now. So when we left off, I had told you guys about remember I told you that there was a supervisor, and then that was the supervisor for the lead investigator. Well, who I'm about to talk about is their supervisor. So he's like head honcho supervisor of the two investigators that I talked about. And he's giving his testimony, and of course I just picked out the testimony or the things that he said that stuck out to me the most. So of course he is another one that is sticking to the story that John never entered the house, so that is why he didn't get a warrant to search the house. You know, he said like he has to have, or they have to have you know, cause to invade people's privacy like that by going into their homes, and there was nothing that led him to believe that John had been inside, even though Karen said that he went inside. If it's enough to believe the people that, you know, own the house and the people who were at the house saying, oh, he never came inside, if that's all it takes to believe that he never went inside, why is that not enough to believe that Karen said he did go inside to have probable cause to get a warrant on the house? And I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the last video, but her lawyer was like, you know, the way he was dressed when he was found in the snow, like, wouldn't that lead you to believe as an investigator, like, oh, where's his coat? We're in the middle of a blizzard, you know, maybe he left the coat inside. That wouldn't be, you know, a possible thought that you could have. He's like, no, because I had no reason to think that he was inside, so I had no reason to think that he had a coat that he would leave inside. So he is discussing the injuries that John sustained, and he mentions the abrasions on John's arm. And one important thing to point out is that even him, out of his own mouth, said that mind you, he keeps calling them abrasions, but they're lacerations, on his arm are patterned. Like, it's a pattern markings on his arm. Remember this moving forward. And he's like, yeah, like that's consistent with him being hit, like the Lexus backing up into him. So now they are saying that the Lexus backed into John and it hit him in the arm. But keep in mind, before it hit him in the face, and that's where most of the injuries to his face come from. But he is now saying that, you know, the abrasions came from John being hit in the arm. He points out that Karen called John around 53 times that night. He points out that she was driving around. However, it was not a secret that Karen was driving around. Before she called the friends to go help her look for John, she had tried driving around on her own as well. So I believe she drove back to the bar that they started the night out at. Like, I don't know, maybe if he went back to the bar. However, what is interesting about the fact that they're pointing out that Karen drove around that night is, remember this, so she is now driving around after she supposedly hit John, right? And she hit John, and the only real damage the car has is the tail light to the car. So, you know, baby, everywhere you go nowadays, I'm not sure if people realize this or not, but you are being watched, okay? There is surveillance everywhere. It's not just like homes that have Ring cameras and stuff like that, you know. They have surveillance on damn near every street, especially like main streets that you're driving down, right? So the cameras around town do pick up on Karen driving around after, you know, she had gone home and when she went back out. But you know what they don't have? You know what one camera that she drives past does not have? There are 2 minutes missing on that camera that would have shown the back of Karen's car and would have shown what her taillight looked like around, you know, 1, 2, whatever time it was in the morning. Mysteriously, there are 2 minutes missing that would have shown what the car looks like as it drives past, so you can see the back of the car. You see the rest, you see the front of the car, you see all that, but somehow they're missing 2 minutes that show what the back of her car. Like, do I get a little black? I feel like you can never really go wrong with a little black. So I'm gonna add a little bit, just a little bit. So now remember the explanation that he gave on why they didn't go inside the house. That sounds, but you know, we're gonna go with it. So he also comes up with a interesting reason on another witness and why they didn't really find him credible. So we are in the middle of a snowstorm. You know what comes with snowstorms? Plow truck drivers. So there is a plow truck driver who plowed the road that night while everything was going on, right? And this plow truck driver claims at no point did he see John's body. So here's the thing. Well, I'm going to talk about the plow driver later, but one of the things to point out with this witness is that the plow driver said that at some point during the night, because he does multiple passes throughout the night, at some point during the night, he sees a Ford Edge parked in front of the house where all of this is going on. And he says it's parked by the flagpole in front of the house where this house is. You know what else was by the flagpole? John's body. So he drove past the house multiple times throughout the night, and one of the times he drives past, he sees this Ford picked up in front of the house. So people are speculating if the body was there, that would be one of the reasons he did not see the body, because there is a car parked in front of the house where the body would have been located, right? I don't know. That sounds like that's at least someone that you want to talk to, right? That's someone that you want to see or hear about what they saw that night, you know, kind of gauge how much of this that you can go with. So they asked him. Also, I pointed out in the last video that they did not interview that man until like 18 months later. So basically they interviewed him like late last year. Sometime last year, late last year. So they're asking him, you know, like, why didn't you guys like do more? Or, you know, why wasn't he more crucial to your investigation, stuff like that. This man says they didn't really find him credible as a witness because his story changed too many times. He said, basically he was like, when they were questioning him, you know, 1 second he said that he drove past at this time, and you know, 1 second he said that he didn't see this, and 1 second he said that this street was blocked off, this blah 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 blah. Like I said, I will talk about the plow driver later because the defense actually did call him as a witness, but I just feel like what you're saying isn't giving, especially once you do actually hear what the plow truck driver says, it's giving, you didn't say anything that sounds like someone that you should just write off and say, oh, they're not credible as a witness, because the defense asked the supervisor, well, did you pull up any registrations to see if anyone who was there that night owns a Ford Edge? No. Why wouldn't you do that? Oh, well, we didn't find him credible. But like it was something, right? Like, especially because let us not forget, this is a police officer who passed away. And y'all know how they act when it's a police officer who passed away. So, and it wouldn't have taken much for you to pull up the registrations and for the people that live there, any of that, to see if there was something there. With this man saying that he saw a Ford Edge there that night. But he says, no, he didn't do that. Do y'all think someone that lives there owns a Ford Edge? Apparently, they are saying the police officer who owns the home has a Ford Edge. The homeowner's daughter's boyfriend also supposedly drives a Ford Edge. And there was, I think, like the homeowner's brother, you know, the one who's like also in law enforcement, also owns a Ford Edge. I feel like knowing that people who were there do in fact own a type of car that someone, a witness, says that they saw in front of the car, but you know, he says wasn't credible. Oh, I used this Colourpop Precious Metals palette to do my eyeshadow today. But back to what I was saying. So I feel like it's been pretty clear since I started talking about this, how I feel about this case, right? But like, that's kind of the point of having a trial like this and bringing it in front of a jury of just regular everyday people. And it's the job of the state and the defense to present their cases in a way that the average, you know, regular everyday person can understand what they're presenting and can come to a conclusion on what they think given the evidence that is before them, right? So with that being said, although, you know, I feel a way that I feel about this, I am going to listen to everything that is said. And if there comes a point where, you know, maybe the state starts to get me, maybe they're like, wait a minute, maybe she did do it. That would be like the reality of the process, right? Like, imagine you are a juror sitting there and you're listening to all this and you're thinking this, that, and the third. At least like an objective juror. That is the whole point of this. So all of that to say, I am not above saying that what I'm about to say was that moment where they almost got me, where I was like, now wait a minute, Karen, I've been going to bat for you for the last couple weeks now. Don't piss me off, because what does this mean? Okay, so this is the same supervisor still on the stand, and now they bring out camera footage. So the camera footage, you see me looking down, it's because I wrote down the specific times that she drove past. So the camera footage picks up Karen's car driving past the area that the house is, not specifically in front of the house, because, you know, the ring footage from the people who own the home and the neighbors suddenly wasn't working, wasn't recording, got corrupted somehow. So this is camera footage like in the area, but around 12:17, it places Karen's car somewhere around the area of the home, right? And then they have another camera angle around 5:11, 5:18 a.m., which is like an hour before John's body was found. Once again, placing her like somewhere around the area of where the house is, and it's estimated that she didn't get to. So remember, at some point she calls the sister-in-law and another friend, and she's like, I can't find him, help me find him. So they are claiming that she did not get to the sister-in-law's house until about 5:35 a.m., which would be inconsistent with her being placed somewhere around the home at 5:18 a.m. and then getting to the sister's house at 5:35, because it does not take that much time to get from somewhere around where the house is to the sister-in-law's house. So basically what they're trying to get you to believe is that Karen drove past the crime scene. At that point, John's body would have been outside. She saw John's body, and then she still went to the sister-in-law's house saying, you know, I can't find him. Come with me to help me find him. And then they end up going to the house, and she like directly finds him. And I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous video, but she is also the one who gave him CPR when the group did come across his body in front of the house. So not only do they have this camera footage, but they also have cell tower data. And again, what they are trying to get you to believe is that at the 5:11, 5:18 mark, Karen's phone pings off a cell tower that is near the house. When I heard that, I was like, all right, Karen, wait a minute, because what does this mean? Karen, come to the front of the classroom, because what do you mean your cell phone pinged somewhere near the house before his body was found and before you got to the sister-in-law's house? I done did all this talking for you, Karen. Don't Don't piss me off. But like, I really should have known that I just needed to wait for the defense to come and make it make sense, because that's exactly what he does. So it's now the defense's turn to question this witness, and he's asking him about these cell towers, and I'll try to see if I can like recreate it on the screen, because it definitely helps to have the visual in front of you to understand what's being said right now. But let's say like the cell tower that her phone pings off of at like 5 a.m., it's right here, right? So here is the cell tower where it pings off. Here is where the sister-in-law lives. Here is where the home is, where John's body is found. So I think they said the distance from the home and the cell tower is about 2.4 miles. And the distance between the sister-in-law's house and the cell tower is like 1 mile. So he asked the investigator, would it not make more sense that her phone is pinging off a cell tower that is closer to where the sister-in-law's house is? And he said, I believe he actually said no. And he asked him, like, would you not say the sister-in-law's house is closer to the cell tower than the home to the cell tower? And he says no. Like, at some point, he finally gets him to like beat around the bush and say, yes, the cell tower is closer to the sister-in-law's house than the cell tower is to the home where John's body is. And I really needed that visual, because they almost got me on that one. But basically what the defense is trying to get him to say here and get the jury to understand is, if Karen is driving around 5:18 to get to the sister-in-law's house, it would make sense that her phone is pinging off of that tower, which is closer to the sister-in-law's house, as opposed to that tower and the home where John's body is. And just to bring it on in, the defense brings up the fact that the investigator claims that there are 2 cell phone towers that are actually closer to the house where John's body is, right? Now, Karen's phone pings off of those towers around 12 a.m. And also, remember when I said that camera footage had Karen driving somewhere in the area around the early hours of 12 a.m.? She was dropping John off around that time. So when she's dropping John off around that time, her cell phone actually does ping to the towers that are closer to the house where she left John, right? And then again, when it's like 6 a.m. I think it's 6 a.m. when John's body has been discovered and she is obviously there. Once again, her cell phone pings at the towers that are closer to the house where John is. You know when her phone does not ping at the towers that are closer to the house? At 5:11, 5:18, when they're trying to say she was driving around the area and she drove past the crime scene to see the body. Now let's move on to the reconstruction specialist that the state calls. Baby, when I tell y'all, I ain't never seen nobody get their ass handed to them like that in a courtroom before. I would say I would have felt sorry for this man if he didn't absolutely positively deserve it. All of you up there getting embarrassed, perjuring yourselves, admitting to felonies, you all deserve it. That's exactly what you get. But he is a reconstruction specialist, and let me tell you, within like the first few seconds of being up there, how the defense just completely tore this man apart, had him stuttering, mumbling, and cackling up there, okay? Now, Karen's attorney is like a former veteran, and he specialized in something when he was in the army that, like, I get, basically he knows what he's talking about when it comes to this conversation. And he is trying to show the jury that this reconstruction specialist that the state called does not, okay? One of the first few things he says to this man is, do you have any mathematics, physics, kinematic, or engineering degrees? Any type of degrees like that. This man says no for each one that he asked them. So no, he has no engineering degree. No, he has no mathematics degree, nothing like that, right? So at some point, her lawyer is like, well, what do you have? Like, what certification do you have, especially for you to be considered an expert reconstruction specialist, right? This man says he has an associate's degree in administration of justice. But it doesn't stop there. And again, this is like the first few seconds of asking him questions. It does not stop there. At some point, he asked him, like, what is another word for, and I can't remember the word that he said, but basically he asked him, like, what is another word for basically like speeding up, right? For, and of course, it's a lot more scientific and a lot more proper the way that I just can't remember the word that he used when he said that. And this expert, this reconstruction specialist says, I'm not sure what word, you know, like I'm supposed to be saying here. And he goes, the word is acceleration. And again, it does not stop there. He says, kinematic is a subfield of what broader field? Once again, this specialist says he doesn't know. He does not know what kinematics is a subfield for. And her defense lawyer goes, the word is physics. Baby, the earth could have just opened up and swallowed me right there if I was that man, because so let me tell you about this reconstruction specialist expert's testimony. He too says that the lacerations on John's arm come from the car. He also claims that the first part of John's body to make contact with the car is his arm. So basically, he claims that his arm was hit by the car, and then from that, the velocity with which the car hit him is what projected him about 30 feet away, right? But what he also says is that since the arm was what was hit first by the car, like, you know, you have to explain then the head injuries, right? He claims that he could have hit his head on the concrete, even though his body was found in the grass. Now, I'm just trying to follow along with that. Let's see if you can follow along with this. So think about this. They said Karen had to reverse like 60 feet, something like that, going at about 24 miles per hour into his arm. So that is how he got the scratches on his arm from the taillight. So the car backs up into his arm. It hits him so hard that he falls back and hits his head on concrete. And then, you know, because gravity, after he falls back and hits his head on concrete, somehow his body, and also not only did his body fly through the air, but it rotated through the air as well. It rotated through the air about 30 feet, and that's how he ended up in the grass. Now, I would like to point out that the airbag module in Karen's car doesn't record any type of like vehicle event, right? So, you know, these little computers in the car, if there is a, you know, crash, there's a hit, anything like that, they'll usually record them. And, you know, you would think a car hitting a body at 24 miles per hour that sent it flying 30 feet in the air would record something, but no, it didn't record anything. And again, he said that, you know, John's body was hit and it went flying in the air, and couldn't really explain how that is. But you know what he did, or what he tried to explain, is that, remember the glass that John took out of the bar? That was found near his body. And you know what was found under his body? His cell phone. So he claims that the car hit John's body, and John holding this glass in his hand with his, I'm not sure which arm, I'm not sure if he's a lefty or righty, but it's in one of those arms. That one of his arms gets hit by the car, falls back, head hits concrete, spins, lands about 30 feet away. And again, because gravity, at no point does he let go of the glass until he lands about 30 feet over, because the glass was found with him. So he claims that, yes, it is possible that somehow John held on to that glass like 30 feet when he went flying, and his cell phone was able to land under him. He can't explain whether or not John was holding his cell phone or not, but just imagine that he was. Like, imagine John was holding his cell phone in one hand and a glass in the other, hit in the arm, projected 30 feet, doesn't let go of either one of them, It's really not funny. Doesn't let go of either one of them, and somehow phone lands under his body and glass lands somewhere near his body, 30 feet away. Now, one last thing before I move on to the next witness. I'm not sure if I ever mentioned this, but John lost a significant amount of blood. I would assume it was from the laceration to the back of the head, but there was not a significant amount of blood found at like the initial point of contact with the car, or where they ultimately found his body, like in the snow. There wasn't a whole bunch of blood either. So it's like, okay, well, we know he lost a significant amount of blood. Where is it? But you know, they didn't have a reason to look inside the house. But I'm saying that to say that one of the last few things to mention in this Reconstructionist testimony is that one hair of John's was found on the back of Karen's car. And again, that is supposed to lead you to believe that her car hit John. So the glass was able to fly through the air and the phone was able to fly through the air, because we're just, you know, defying math and science. We're just defying all of that. So that was able to fly through the air. He lost a significant amount of blood, but like none of it is found on the car. Like I said, the initial point of contact in the snow, none of that. But in the middle of a snowstorm, after the car has collided with a body, gone home, left home to go search around for John, left home to go to the sister-in-law's house, and then left the sister-in-law's house to go back to the home where she dropped John off. One hair of John's was able to stay on the car the entire time, and they were able to find one hair of John's on the car. Oh, and I know I keep saying like one last thing, but one last thing on the reconstruction specialist. He claims that, and again, like reconstruction specialist, like his job is to literally like reconstruct the scene of what possibly happened, place things at certain place people at certain times, and place when the actions occurred at certain times, right? This man claims that Karen backed up into John at 12:45 a.m. 12:45. Everything that I say, pay attention to. I promise you, I'm going to pull it back together. I'm going to bring it back so that it makes sense, right? So we are going to move on to another investigator who was called after the reconstruction specialist, right? Now, he says something that just blows everything, right? But before that, they do play voicemails, because remember, Karen called him like 53 times that night. At some point, they do play voicemails from Karen to John, and baby, she is going off, okay? She's like, you're a pervert, F you, you're a loser, I know you're sleeping with other women, blah, 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 blah. Like, she is going off, right? And she's saying this around like 1 a.m. And people are like, well, if she knows that she dropped him off and where he is at 12 something, then why would she be calling him so soon after with those type of voicemails, right? Now, if you guys remember, they were arguing earlier in the day. They were arguing about what he feeds his niece and nephew, and I guess they were also arguing because, you know, like their relationship's been a little rocky. Let's not forget, she did technically cheat on him, so their relationship was a little rocky, right? So apparently, even though they were arguing, they did still end up going to that bar that night. And then, you know, the plan was to go to the house they were invited to and hang out. Well, remember, they said that Karen at some point decided she did not want to go inside, and she just left John there. And she says, you know, like she saw him go in, and that's when she left and she went home. Well, the reason that she didn't want to go in is because they were arguing, right? So she knows where she left him, but in her mind, and also like, y'all listen, ladies, y'all know when you arguing, so she dropped him off, but like she's still texting him and still calling him, and she wants to continue that argument that they're having, but now he's not answering. So even though she knows where she left him off, she knows there are other people there. And as you can tell by those text messages, it gives that, you know, in her mind, she thought that, you know, he wasn't answering because he was cheating on her. He was sleeping with someone else at the house, all that stuff, blah, 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 right? Now, anyone with common sense would say that the state is playing those voicemails because they are trying to establish motive. Like, they're trying to say, you know, the reason that she would back up into her boyfriend intentionally is because she was angry. She thought he was cheating on her. They've been having relationship issues. They pointed out the fact that, you know, she did cheat on him with the ATF agent, all that stuff, right? And that's like pretty much the reason that they played the voicemails at that point for this witness. But the next thing that this witness says that I said just like at least blew my mind, like I really can't believe we're sitting here having this conversation. He testifies that Karen's phone logs on to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. So at 12:36 a.m., they have evidence that would show Karen had to be at John's home because he said it was like password protected, stuff like that. Also, like, y'all know how it works when your phone connects to Wi-Fi. Like, I pay Wi-Fi for my apartment right now. If I go down the street, am I gonna be able to connect to my Wi-Fi? No, because I'm not near the router, right? So that would have to place Karen at John's home at 12:36 a.m. Now, you heard what I just said, that the reconstruction specialists whose job it was to see how everything happened said that John was hit at 12:45 a.m. So he was hit about 15-ish minutes after she was already home at John's home. And remember the sister-in-law after she testified, stuff like that, and she kept saying that she saw Karen's car in the driveway. And that's when she was texting him like, hey, are you coming inside? Hey, like, you still coming in? But she says that she saw Karen's car. She said she saw Karen's car at 12:40, which again is still 4 minutes after Karen was already home, logged onto John's Wi-Fi at 12:36, which means I think they said like John was like 6-ish minutes away. For her to be at John's house at 12:36 logging in, she would have had to have left the house where she dropped John off at like no later than 12:29 a.m. Okay, here's my thing, right? Especially for people talking about credible witnesses and all that stuff. How come all of the credible witnesses that the state did decide to call and the investigators did decide to interview, how come all of these credible witnesses, like none of the stuff you guys say actually adds up to what you can prove on paper, right? Because what you can prove by word of mouth, especially people who are friends with this person, who babysits for that person, you can say anything for that, right? But how come the stuff that y'all are saying does not add up to the things that they don't have any bias in this, right? Google saying that you search how long does it take for a body to die in the cold. Google doesn't have any bias in saying that you search that at 2-something a.m., right? Or, you know, the Wi-Fi showing that she was home at 12:36, or the cell towers showing that, you know, it didn't ping near the home at 5 a.m. How come the stuff that y'all are claiming credible witnesses have to say does not add up to that? But I'm supposed to believe that? So the state pretty much wraps up their case with the medical examiner, and I was ready. I was ready to hear what she had to say. And one of the first few things that she had to say is that John's cause of death was blunt impact to the head and hypothermia. And then she said the manner of death she could not determine. So it was left undetermined. I think I mentioned that to y'all in a previous video. And I told y'all that the lead investigator called her a whack job because her ultimate result was undetermined for his manner of death, because he was like, we gave her so much evidence to show her that it was a homicide and he was hit by the car, blah, blah, blah. But she stood on it. She stood on business and she said, nah, the manner of death I was unable to determine. And if you guys are confused on the difference between cause of death and manner of death, so cause of death, and in this case, his cause of death being blunt impact to the head, it was that blunt impact to the head that is what caused him to die, right? But when she has to determine his manner of death, that means she is supposed to tell you that this is how he sustained that blunt impact, right? So when they say cause of death, they can say like his cause of death was, blunt this, or, pneumonia, this, that, and the third, blah, 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 blah. But the manner of death is when they're supposed to tell you like, just natural aging, homicide, suicide, something like that, right? So that is what she is saying. She cannot determine that it was a homicide. She wouldn't be able to determine if it was a suicide. Like, that's what she means by she cannot determine his manner of death. And that is why the lead investigator was upset with her, because he claims that they gave her all the evidence that she needed to know that this was a homicide. But she said, baby, I said what I said. I stand 10 toes down on it, and he wouldn't have been able to change my mind. So they start asking her about the, shoulda, woulda, couldas with what happened, right? They bring up the lacerations and the abrasions, and they start asking questions. Well, could it have been from a motor vehicle? She basically says it could have not, it could have not been the motor vehicle. They ask, could it have been from a fight? Same thing. She says it could have not come from that. She did say the laceration to the back of the head most likely came from either an object or the curb. So remember, like, one of the possibilities we're supposed to believe here is that somehow John's head hit the curb, and that's where the laceration to the back of his head comes from. But she also does say it could have come from an object like a bat or a weight, like, a weight. So you remember I told you guys that they sold the house after this situation? You know what was at the bottom of the house? A gym. You know what you can find in a gym? Weights, dumbbells, plates. You can find all that, and that's real heavy. And if someone hits you in the back of the head with that, that would be some blood trauma. Oh, something I forgot to mention from the investigator who is the one that testified that Karen's Wi-Fi connected at 12:36. So I believe I told you guys that at some point John was wearing an Apple Watch, and the Apple Watch registered John going like up and down 3 flights. So you want to know how he tried to explain that? He explained it that it wasn't John actually walking that registered those 3 flights. It was John moving in a car that registered those 3 flights of John going up and down. Remember what I just said about like, why is it the state's witnesses testimony like doesn't line up with like logic? But people are also like, okay, so if all of a sudden now an Apple Watch registers like movement like that as walking, then like how come it doesn't register that like when you're on a plane or any other time that you're driving, anything like that? And one last thing on the medical examiner, at some point the state asked her, is it possible that the hypothermia could have come before the blunt trauma to his head? So they asked her, is it possible that he got hypothermia from being outside in a blizzard, and then after getting the hypothermia, he had some type of blunt trauma to the head that caused him to die? I believe her answer was something like, she pretty much stayed neutral throughout all of her testimony. People were like, baby, like, just tell us the facts, but also, like, got to keep in mind, this woman is still going to have to work with these investigators, these agencies, stuff like that. And if they're willing to go through all of this, then she wants to, be very careful with what she's saying right now. But I think she said something to the effect of like, it's possible, but it's unlikely that the hypothermia happened first, because for the hypothermia to have happened first, it would have had to have continued on through the process of him getting whatever head injury that he got. Okay, so we're gonna like quickly fast forward this part, but the state did call about like 2 witnesses that they wanted to have testify on the whole sister-in-law Google searching at 2 a.m. How long does it take to die in the cold? Now, someone pointed out, like, why would the state feel that they needed to harp on that so hard to prove that that didn't happen at 2? We know why they want it, but like in a regular case, a case that made sense, all that, like, the sister-in-law is not on trial. You know, even if she did get mixed up, stuff like that, blah, 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 it really shouldn't be that big of a deal to call this many people to prove it. If the fact that she did Google that at 2 a.m. is a huge blow to your case when you're trying to prove that, you know, the woman who would have been at home around that time is the one who backed up into him like 2 hours earlier. But they did call like 2 people who were supposed to be like tech experts to testify on the whole Google search. And it's funny because like they ultimately say the same thing of both of them saying that like it didn't happen at 2 a.m. But they actually say like 2 different, they get to the same conclusion, but they say it like 2 different ways, but that's still an inconsistency and there are 2 different ways. So one of them says that like pretty much the search did not happen at all, which I'm not even sure how Google would work that way. I did see a Google engineer commenting who said like that's not how Google works, but basically like was trying to say that when she did make the Google search at 6 a.m. that like deletes it happening at 2 a.m. Like somehow Google searching, like child, I'm so damn confused. I don't even know how to explain this to you. But basically, like, you know when you'll open your phone and you'll have a tab open and it was open previously. So basically her opening it at like 6 a.m. deletes whatever was searched prior, whatever time that happened. So when she searched it at 6 a.m., what was shown to be deleted at 2 was whatever the tab was open to prior and not what she was searching at 6 a.m. But you also know why that wouldn't make sense, because when the Google search shows that she Google searched how long does it take to die in the cold, when she Google searched it again at 6 a.m., it was spelled completely differently. So how does Google register different words being searched at different times of the day? And then the other person that they called to testify ultimately pretty much says that like the same thing, that the search didn't happen at 2 a.m. But basically said that the deletion did happen. No, the deletion did. So basically, listen, child, basically one of them is saying that like there was no deletion because there was no 2 a.m. search. And the other one is saying that there was a deletion, but it wasn't a deletion of how long does it take for, you know, a body to die in the cold. And I'm emphasizing the house because clearly what was meant to be typed was how long does it take, but like what was spelled was HOS, long. And that's the thing, like how does Google register different words being searched at different times throughout the day? And again, you see what I'm saying? Like how come the expert testimony does not register with like technology, with science, with math? It just, all of that goes out the window because of what people are saying. But anyway, child, after the medical examiner, the state finally rests their case. It took about like 30 days for us to get there. And then now it is time for the defense to present the jury with their case. And baby, they're like, listen, it's only about to take like 3 days. We really only need like 3 days to get through our witnesses and then we're gonna call it a wrap. So it is now the defense's turn, and of course they call the Plow driver as like one of their first witnesses. And I kind of mentioned him before, and here's my thing. I think he was a good witness. The only thing is, you know, I want to say it in the nicest way because he was a nice guy, right? But like sometimes I think we all know that like everyone is not as smart or as witty or as on their toes as the next person, right? That's why it's possible for scammers to exist, because there's always going to be someone out there who's vulnerable, who's naive, who doesn't know any better, stuff like that. And there's always going to be someone out there who is quicker, is wittier. And I feel like when you watch some of these cases, you can notice it as just like a regular person watching from home, right? So these lawyers, these people who are like trained to do this, who have such extensive schooling, stuff like that, they know when they're talking to someone who, if you just kind of like talk in circles and try to confuse them, you'll most likely easily do that. And I think that's what happened with him. I don't think that he was confused with his testimony, I think like the way certain questions were posed, even from the defense, honestly, truly, I think how some of the questions were posed to him like confused him a little bit. So that's why, as a juror, like a juror could look at that and be like, I don't know about him, because he doesn't even seem like he knows if he knows about him. So I could see how that happened. But like, I stayed along with what he was saying, and he did mention the Ford being parked in front of the house. He said that he saw it in front of the house, and you know, he said it stuck out to him and it was kind of weird to him because like it's not a usual thing for the home. Of course, he knows the homeowners as well, like knows of them, right? And he knows of them so much so that they ask him, especially on a night like this where there's like a snowstorm and a blizzard, stuff like that, what would usually happen? And I think he said what would usually happen is like, I think they would try to contact the homeowner to like move the vehicle so that the street can be towed, stuff like that. And then if it wasn't moved, then they would have the vehicle towed. So they asked him, well, why didn't you do that? Like, why didn't you call about the car to have it moved, stuff like that? And he said, well, I was trying to be courteous to the homeowners, because he knows the homeowners, right? But like, this is someone who knows of the homeowners, and I guess like these are very powerful people around town, but like clearly is not, you know, loyal or scared enough of these people, because you know, he's testifying and his story really hasn't changed from the first time that he said it. But also, again, just to like let you know that literally everyone knows everyone in this town. But yeah, he said, you know, like he didn't call because he was trying to be courteous to the homeowners. But this is the Plow driver who claims that there was a Ford, what I said earlier, Ford what? Ford something parked in front of the home, which is where John's body was ultimately found. It was parked near where John's body was found. So he is testifying, and he says as a Plow driver that they have like rounds that they have to make. So he made a round around 2 something a.m. sometime around the time that Google search of how long does it take to die in the cold was made. And he claims there was no body there when he passed by the first time around, right? So the next round that he has to make as a Plow driver was sometime around 3 o'clock in the morning. And once again, he claims there was no body there. Now, here's where I feel like the questioning kind of started to confuse him, which is why it sounds like he tripped up on his words. But basically, the third time around, when he's making his next round as the Plow driver, is sometime around 5:30 something in the morning, and he is saying that he does not see a body on the ground. But I think what he is trying to say with the rest of the testimony that he gives is that he couldn't see if there was a body on the ground at that 5:30 something a.m. mark because the street was blocked off. Remember, they ultimately found John's body and called 911, and first responders were there, stuff like that, sometime between 5 and 6 a.m. And I think that's what he was trying to say when he was saying that like he didn't see a body at 5 a.m. because he physically couldn't because of like first responders, stuff like that, the third time around that he drove by. That's a cute blush. And that's really all you need to know on the Plow driver, is that he saw the car in front of the home, and as someone who drove down the street multiple times throughout the night, he claims that he didn't see a body there. So moving on, the defense calls a pathologist to testify. And one of the first things like they zero in on him is the arm injury. So if you are actually watching the live stream of the trial, then you actually see the picture of John's arm. I'm not going to include it just because like this is still a person, right? And I just don't want to help in spreading a picture of a deceased person's, you know, remains. I just don't want to do that. But the picture is out there if you would like to see it and to like kind of understand what I'm about to say. But the pathologist testifies that the injuries to John's arm happened before he died. Now, remember, the state is trying to convince this jury that the car hit his arm, and that is what, you know, started all of this. But he is saying that the injury happened before death, and he's also saying that, I had to get the word correct, that the injuries are anti-mortem. So another reason of how it happened before death, because if you are looking at the picture that the rest of the courtroom is looking at, it looks like, imagine me saying, you know, someone just got cut open, or, you know, someone has a laceration, a wound, something like this. Is the first color that you think of the wound being red? Because that's what it looks like. I'm trying to explain it the best way that I can without actually including the picture of his arm. But like, that's what the marks look like on his arm. They look red-ish, how you would imagine a wound to the body, right? He says if the injury was post-mortem, the injuries would have appeared to be like an orange yellow-ish, which I guess kind of makes sense if you think like what decomposition starts to look like. I guess that would kind of make sense. But yeah, that's why he's testifying that he believes that the injury was done before he died, all of that, right? Which I guess you technically could say, because he didn't die on impact. So even if the car did hit his arm, then that's still an injury that happened before death. But let's just keep going, right? So one thing that is very important for this pathologist to testify is that his initial thought when seeing this injury and like figuring out everything that happened was that it was done by an animal, and not just any animal, but a dog. Now, remember, the house owner had a dog at the time that this happened, but the dog was rehomed after all of this. And if you remember in the very beginning of this video, I told you how the supervisor investigator said that the lacerations on John's arm were in a pattern. I believe the reconstruction specialist also used the word pattern when describing the laceration on the arm. And I think the medical examiner also used the word pattern. Now let's think about this. If he got hit by a taillight, think of like smashed taillight, smashed glass. When smashed glass or smashed plastic cuts up your skin, does it cut up your skin in a pattern? Or is it like sporadic? Y'all, I swear I was in the middle of making a good point and then boom, camera overheats. Hold on a second. Okay. So like I was saying, think about it. When, you know, shards of glass or plastic cut you, it's usually sporadic depending on how the glass breaks in that moment, right? It's not really a pattern type thing. And we're supposed to believe that the car backed up, hit him, you know, spontaneously, then he fell and then flew, all of that. So, and if you see the marks on it, it literally like starts like here or something-ish and then kind of goes down this way. So how did he get patterned lacerations on his arm from glass or, you know, plastic that broke, stuff like that? But you know what does sound like it makes more sense? Like something, you know, like patterned teeth that dog have, chomp down once and then chomp down again. That seems like it makes more sense. In my head, it made more sense in the pathologist's head as well, because he basically was like, his injuries are not consistent with being hit with a motor vehicle. He actually specifically said, if you think about it, when you're hit by a car, especially with like significant impact, there's going to be bruising. So it threw him off that there wasn't. And he ultimately did say that the other injuries that John had, you know, because let's also remember the injuries that he had to his face, those are consistent with someone who might have been in a fight. All right, y'all, I had to speed up the makeup because I forgot I had a meeting, which means I got to wrap up this video. But here's my thing on John's injuries. Do I think they're consistent with him getting hit with a car? No, it just does not make sense. From the projectile to all of this, it just does not make sense. However, do I feel like the theory going around that he was jumped when he went in the house also makes sense with his injuries? No, not really. Like, think about it. The trauma that would come to your body from being hit by a 7,000 pound vehicle, we're like, okay, that doesn't make sense because he doesn't have any bruising and everything like that, blah, 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 right? But when you think about it, the trauma that would come to your body from getting jumped by multiple grown men, these are grown men that work in law enforcement, police officers, stuff like this, right? So the theory that, you know, he walked into the house and he got jumped as soon as he went, wouldn't he still also have bruising from that, you know? He did say that there were some bruises on this side of his hands, and those are typically like defense wounds. However, the medical examiner also said those could be bruises from the IVs that were put into his body when he went to the hospital. But like, think about it. Grown men are jumping you. You just got some scratches to your face and swollen eyes, maybe the swollen eyes. The pathologist did say that for the laceration to the back of his head, all it could take is one good punch to the face that, you know, sent him back, and then he hit his head that way. And like the one good punch to the face, maybe that could explain like the swollen eyes and stuff like that. But still, like, even with a good punch to the face, nothing broken, no bruising, just some scratches and his swollen eyes. Now, I do know whatever happened to him in that house. Okay, it happened to him in that house. Some of the theories that I have seen that make a little bit more sense are that, you know, he walked into the house, because don't forget that ATF agent was pretty much goading him to come to the house. Like, you still coming? Where you at? Well, you know, when you're trying to get someone to come where you're going to. And then he walked in his Apple Watch recorded the flights down the stairs. So he went down the stairs to where the basement is. And, you know, when he walked in there, he was immediately hit in the back of the head with something. That would make more sense to me. Something else that would also make sense to me is maybe it was a freak accident and they just did not take the right, you know, steps on solving it, because maybe the dog bit him. Maybe the dog bit him, you know, was chomping down on his arm, and then in the excitement of trying to get the dog off of him, he tripped, he fell, something fell back, and that is how he hit his head. And then he started to, you know, kind of bleed out from that hit to the back of his head. If that were to happen, that is something I feel like could have been explained. That's something that, you know, was a freak accident, and, you know, that ultimately, unfortunately, is, you know, how he ends up passing away. But I feel like that isn't like, you know, you're gonna go to jail. Actually, I don't know. Could you? I know you would be responsible for his death, but like, criminally, would you be responsible for that? Because I feel like if that had happened, like, they could have just said that. But again, there's a lot of ego. If y'all haven't noticed, there's a lot of ego in this case, and we already know when it comes to cops. So it was like, they just thought, instead of saying, if that is what happened, you know, we're going to cover it up, and we're going to say that he was this, that, and the third, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like that last one, that like, or, you know, some people were saying that, you know, he was getting into a fight with one of them, which could explain the defense wounds, and the dog saw it, and the dog, being a protector, bit down on him. So if that is what happened, and then he hit his head, you know, that's why they would be covering. We don't know, child. We do not know. And the way that they investigated this case, they made damn sure that we don't know. But I do have 2 more witnesses that I need to get through, but we are going to speed through them, okay? So the defense actually did call their own reconstruction, especially, they actually called 2 of them. The first one, baby, blew the states out of the water. This man built a cannon to go through this reconstruction process. And also, this reconstruction specialist that the defense called, he was actually brought in by the Department of Justice and the FBI. Because if you guys remember in the other video I mentioned, the FBI is now investigating the investigation into this case. So actually, the FBI and the DOJ contacted this man they gave him all the evidence and said, like, let us know what you come up with out of this, right? So he made his own report, and then he gave his report to the defense and the state, which means the state knew that this witness existed, but they didn't call him. They called Mr., you know, doesn't know what acceleration is. They called that man instead of this one. But this one built a cannon, and he built the cannon to kind of reconstruct the glass that, you know, John supposedly had that night. And the test was to see if it was possible that John could have thrown the glass at the taillight. And that's where because remember, multiple people said that the taillight was cracked in the morning when they first saw it. It wasn't until later that it was fully shattered, and now they're finding pieces days later. So he built this cannon to throw a glass at the taillight and see if that is possibly what could have cracked the taillight. So that theory would be that John is the one who threw the glass at the taillight, and that is how that damage to the car happened. Which, if John is the one who threw the glass at the taillight, Does that not shatter them saying that the taillight is shattered because it came into contact with John's body? However, if you then question if John is the one who threw the glass at the taillight, you would have to question why would he have thrown it at the taillight? And then people are speculating, well, they were arguing that night and they're drunk. They're both drunk. So he was angry, you know, she didn't want to stay. So he threw the glass at the car. Now Karen would hear a thump, right, from something hitting her car. So if it is true that in the morning Karen was saying, did I hit him? Did I hit him? Oh my God, did I hit him? That could be a reason if she did say that, because we don't actually have Karen saying that on, like, you know, dash cam footage, ring footage, stuff like that. This is word of mouth of Karen saying, it's not even people's reports that she said that. But if she did, could that be a reason why she said that? He threw something at her car. She hears a thud. Now the next morning she wakes up, her boyfriend is dead in the front lawn and she was drunk. So it's possible that she could have been saying, oh my God, did I hit him? I know I was drunk, but like I couldn't have been that drunk. That could be a reason why she said that. But that was one of the tests that he did as a reconstructionist. And then he also said that John's arm being hit would not have projected him 30 feet into the air. He said John's arm weighs about 11 pounds, but the rest of his body weighs over like 200 pounds. So because of, you know, gravity, the impacts from the car would not have been enough to, the impact of the car hitting his arm would not have been enough to throw the rest of his 200-pound body 30 feet away. So then the defense brings in a second reconstruction specialist who says that if the car had hit John's arm, there would have been a whole lot more extensive damage to John's arm than the laceration, the patterned lacerations that you saw on his arm. Like his arm possibly could have even been fractured, but you would have seen bruising. He said you would have seen significant damage if the car had hit John's arm first and then sent him flying, especially at 24 miles per hour. So then, because, you know, he's a defense witness, so after the defense questions him, of course the state gets to question him. The state asks him, oh well, is there any evidence that maybe his arm was tucked in when he was hit by the car? Like, I think he was trying to say, like, you know, maybe he saw the car coming and tried to brace himself, so he tucked his arm in. And could that be why there's not such extensive damage to his arm? And this witness said what needed to be said about this case, right? Just like mic drop, end the case there. That witness said, well, that's the problem. There's no evidence that would tell you what may have been occurring at the time if that incident did happen, or if that incident happened at all. There's no evidence to say any of this or anything that possibly happened that night in this case. Exactly. And then after that, the defense rested their case as well. So yeah, that was it. The defense wrapped up their case and then they turned it over to the jury. Now, there are two things that I want to say has happened since, you know, it was handed over, like things that have come out, stuff like that. But I will say, did the state, I keep saying state, but they're known as the Commonwealth, convince me that Karen hit that man with her car? No, they did not. Not at all. Not at all. From defense witnesses to state witnesses, there literally has not been enough evidence that shows that there was some collision with her car and John's body. There was a lot shown between the defense and state witnesses that there was a lot of inconsistency, a lot of people who were just talk like a lot that just did not make sense. Do I think he was jumped in the house like people are saying? No. Do I think there was some type of altercation, whether it was between him and one other person, him and a dog, and it somehow led to him getting like a bad fall that he hit his head and then bled out from that laceration? Yes. Will we ever know? I don't know. I feel like at this point, because like the evidence is so muddy, when it comes to evidence, I don't know. At this point, I feel like it's going to take one of them cracking and snitching on the rest to, you know, save themselves, for us to find out what happened. And that might just happen since the FBI is the one investigating the investigation into this case. And you would think like at least we could find out for his family. However, people are now questioning, like, does the family even really want to know, or does the family just want to believe what the family believes? Because at this point, I believe the family, except for maybe John's dad, believes that Karen did it. Like, Karen hit him with her car. And you would think, like, okay, maybe you believe that, like, initially, especially just going off of the investigation and what was presented by the state. But you sat through this case and you still feel that way? And they must really still feel that way, because yesterday, you know, after everything was rested and like it was going to be handed to the jury, you know, the homeowner where this happened, the homeowner and the nephew who, you know, had the bruised knuckles, John's family invited them to sit with them in the courtroom. Like, they were literally sitting in the courtroom, like, meanwhile, like, staring down the defense, Karen, and the jury. And I'm just like, really? Like, you really gonna invite them to sit with you in, like, even if for some reason you still believe that, you know, Karen did it. Like, after hearing this stuff, hearing that these are people that your son, brother, this was associated with, and he was literally gonna backdoor him if they could have found a place to adult wrestle. Like, you still don't want to distance yourself at all from these people? But, you know, I'm not going to question too much on people that are grieving. But yeah, that is how I feel. Whatever happened to him in that house. People were saying, like, hopefully, even though the house was sold, like, somehow maybe the FBI can go in and like rip up the floors. Oh, because they did redo the floors in that house before selling it, and see, like, maybe there's like stained blood underneath the new floors, all of that stuff. I will check one more time before I end this video to see if the verdict has come in. But two things I wanted to let you know before I ended this video is that one of the jurors was dismissed yesterday morning. They dismissed a juror before letting the jurors, you know, deliberate on the case. I didn't see it anywhere, like, specifically, but I think, like, the reason for it might have been, like, she was too animated while some of the state witnesses were testifying. So let's say, you know, the one that was texting about Karen in the group chat was talking, like, if he said something, she would like roll her eyes or like clearly show that, you know, she felt some type of way about the defense witnesses, which is why, baby, I couldn't do it. If that's all it takes for you to get dismissed, they would put me out after day one, because the first time I heard something stupid on there, I would have been like, no. So a juror was dismissed yesterday. Also, I'm not sure if that plays into the possibility that people are speculating, like, if everyone in town knows each other, was to make you think like there are people on this jury who, you know, are not swayed by the fact that they know all these people involved, stuff like that. But the last thing I'm gonna say, it was being speculated that, oops, because people were like, you know, well, what motive other than the fact that, you know, the one ATF agent was trying to fool around with Karen, what motive would these people have to do this big of a cover up and to want to, you know, take John out, blah, 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 blah. Well, it came out because, let's not forget, John was a police officer. John had reported to his higher ups that there was like a string of like drug trafficking going around, and allegedly one of the people that he listed was part of selling these drugs is the nephew that had the bruised knuckles, the nephew that was there that night, that nephew. Yeah. So allegedly John had dropped a dime on little nephew, allegedly. It's alleged that it was about the nephew. It is not alleged that John actually did go up to his higher ups. That has been confirmed. That is confirmed that he was trying to report about like drug selling going on. That sounds like some motive to me. But let me check. All right, y'all, I'm gonna check to see if a verdict has come in. I'm not sure why I'm nervous. Nope, as of 2 hours ago, it still says verdict watch. So they have not come to a verdict yet, which I saw some people saying that's a good thing. Some people saying it's a bad thing. I don't know. I really don't know. I feel like I really can't see how they find this woman guilty. If anything, it might be like hung jury, like one person that just is not going to budge on this one. But if they come back with a guilty verdict, that would have blew me. Let me see. Nope, there is no verdict yet. So the next video that I upload on Karen is going to let you guys know what the verdict is and where we go from there. So thank you guys for tuning in to today's video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Now that the case is wrapped up, let me know where you stand if you were on the jury. Let me know all that in the comments down below. Make sure to thumbs up, comment, subscribe, turn notification bells down below. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.